Okay, welcome everyone to this edition of Mountaineer Farm Talk. My name is JJ Barrett. I'm the extension agent for West Virginia University here in Wood County for Ag and Natural Resources. And of course, my co-host with the most, Evan Wilson, is live at the Appalachian Grazing Conference. Hello, Evan.
Yes, JJ, everything's going good up here in Morgantown, here at the Waterfront Hotel Resort here in Morgantown for the Appalachian Grazing Conference. Good turnout.
Awesome. I heard that you guys went on an exciting farm tour yesterday.
Yeah, we took a couple tours of farms in the Harrison County area around Lost Creek. It was pretty exciting to see what people are doing on the farms for different operations and what works for them.
Good. We're always trying to get more information out to our producers. I want to introduce for our guests this week. We have three that are all attending the Appalachian Grazing Conference. First, we have Ronnie Knuckles. He is from Overhome Farm in Virginia. How are you doing, Ronnie?
Doing fine.
Good. We have Kevin Moyers from Twilight Farms. Welcome, Kevin.
Good morning.
And then we have George Lake from Thistle Creek Farm. George, how are you doing this morning? In Pennsylvania, I'm sorry. Real quick, Evan, I'll go over our commodity minute, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
As of this,
around JJ, I'm gonna turn them around so they can kind of see your face.
Okay.
Not as odd.
Okay.
There we go. Wait, hold on now.
We can see us.
While you're doing that, Evan, I'll just go over cash price for corn next week is $6.86. Soybeans are $16.07, and wheat is at a record price of $9.42. Like Evan and I were discussing before the program started, that is a really high commodity price for wheat. Of course, a lot of our farmers, U.S. farmers, have already sold their wheat, 80 or 90%, but having to do with the Ukraine issue, all of our commodity prices are spiking, and oil, of course. Real quick, at Jackson County Livestock, they had a bred cow sale. Bred cows averaged $864 to $1395 per head, and cow calf pairs were from $1244 to a top of $1503. And at Muskingum Livestock in Zanesville, Ohio, fat steers are bringing from $1.30 to $1.54. Commercial slaughter cows are at $88 to $1.05. Butcher bulls are at $90 to $1.35. 500 to 600 pound heifers were at $1 to $1.60. Steers were $1.10 to $1.62 for 5 to 6 weights, and 400 pound steers topped out at $1.87. So that is our commodity minute. Did you time that, Evan, to make sure that was exactly a minute?
Close enough.
Okay.
I can make you talk faster.
Let's go ahead and dig into the program. We're going to be talking about, of course, grazing management. We're at the Appalachian Grazing Conference. Let's start with George Lake. Tell us a little bit about your farm and how you have implemented rotational grazing.
Well, we started, we had a sudden death in the family, and the farm hadn't been turned over properly, and I was on active duty with the Marine Corps. I lost all livestock and equipment, but was able to keep the tax court, but I was able to keep the farm, all the ground. I had no equipment. At that time, there was nothing to read about grazing, but I thought, well, they've got 4 legs, I've got 2, so I can't do what they can do, and I didn't have any equipment to haul anything to them. So I got the cheapest system I could set up, got a couple of sale barn animals. Didn't have the right grasses, didn't have the right genetics, but that was the start of rotational grazing for us because I needed to have them do the majority of the work rather than me.
Well, that sounds reasonable.
We had, when I came home, part of our farm is an abandoned quarry, 100 years old, sand quarry.
Really?
High quality sand. I still get sand there when I need mortar for something. And our corn production with non-GMO corns, which I still plant, with side dressing and corn starter, 37 bushels the acre was the average. We now, with no fertilizer, averaged 180 to 190 bushels an acre a year. Same old non-GMO corns. Quite a production difference because of the stomping organic matter into the soil and building microbes and earthworms. One soil scientist that has been there said we have a minimum of 400 pounds of earthworms per acre. And so do the plowing, and they really build productive soils.
So do you work the soil, or do you mostly plant no-till?
We plant all no-till. We only plant, well, we do plant about every 7 years, we do 20 acres of corn. So that rotates through our farm and our rotational grazing system.
Okay. Let me move to Kevin Moyers. He is from Twilight Farm. They're in Hot Springs, Virginia. Kevin, tell us a little bit about your farm and how you implement rotational grazing.
Okay, so I have a farm background. I grew up on a farm in Pendleton County, West Virginia. It's a pretty diversified farm. We had dairy, we had beef cows, we had sheep, no rotational grazing at all. I went away. I'm an engineer by trade, work at a paper mill. And so about 15 years ago, my wife and I started our own operation, and was started on all rented land. And our very first landlord, he'd attended some grazing conferences, and he had actually played a little bit with rotational grazing, with temporary fencing. And so we got our ideas from him, our initial ideas. He actually loaned us his temporary fence materials to use on his farm, and that's kind of how we got started. And from there, we've been pretty faithful about going to grazing conferences and trying to keep up with updates. And finally, we're able to purchase a little bit of our own property a few years ago. And so we're in a process of, we've been in the process of converting that novel endophyte fescue and splitting up our farm into paddocks. And now we're in the process of converting our markets more to direct marketing pasture-based beef.
Kevin, if I can ask, what that novel type fescue, what company did you go with the novel type fescue? What type?
We've actually got a variety. Our first attempt, we planted half Bar Optima E31 and half Max Q Jessup.
Okay.
Of the two, the Bar Optima we like better for palatability. We like the Max Q for hardiness. Since then, I've tried Martin ProTech. I've got a stand of that. I've got a stand of Max Q Texoma. And the latest stand I planted, I went back to some Bar Optima and some more Max Q. So we've tried a little bit of everything. I don't see a whole lot of difference. I do see some difference in the hardiness of the new stands, with Max Q being a little better and Bar Optima not quite as good.
Okay. And let's move to Ronnie Knuckles from the Overhome Farm. What county are you from, Ronnie?
We are in Goochland County, which is
Goochland,
5 miles west of Richmond.
Okay.
And the farm is located about a mile north of the James River.
Okay.
I took over management of part of the family farm. My father passed away suddenly. He had managed cow-calf herd for about 60 years. We had very little division fencing, so rotation was not an option for him. And, he just continued to do things the way he'd always done them. When I took over management, I could see that style wasn't going to work for me. So started going to grazing schools and conferences, and first of all, did an SL6 exclusion practice to give me fencing. And we did a rotational grazing plan and division fencing to make that possible. With that, I started seeing results almost immediately. Weed pressure decreased. I could finally manage my cattle. So just a great tool. I use a lot of annuals in rotational grazing. I fill the gaps in the summer with a warm season mix, predominantly with millet and some other ingredients mixed in. And then I shorten the winter gap with just a variety of species that'll come up quick. And I usually can get grazing in December from this mix. And then it comes back in spring and I'm full grazing the herd mid-March. So I've been very pleased with that. I am currently converting a lot of these pastures to the novel endophyte-free fescue also.
Okay. Let me go ahead and the next question, I will start with you, Ronnie, with the,
okay.
What's the best advice you would give to a young or beginning farmer or someone that, like in a situation that you're talking about, they've either inherited or are taking over for a, after their parents have passed away? What's the best advice you could give them for rotational grazing or some farm management tips?
Seek other advice. Don't just assume what your father had been doing was the only way to do it. And I think cattle producers tend to fall into that trap. Row crop producers, farmers, I mean, they have made major changes in the way they operate, but cattle farms, the smaller ones particularly, they just keep going in the same mold. So look out there, see what other options are available, do your homework before you start spending money.
Yeah, and Kevin, what is your advice?
I think my biggest advice is be careful where you invest your money. You need to invest in something that's going to produce income, and that's, you know, primarily livestock and land improvements. You know, I like to tell people, pretty cows will make you a few dollars. Pretty trucks cost you a lot more. So you're better off put your money into cows. You know, pasture improvements, forage improvements, they'll make you a few dollars. So, you know, focus on your management, focus on improving what you got, and don't try to keep up with the neighbors on the equipment side, because it will bankrupt you.
Okay, well, that's some good advice. George, what's your opinion?
That's good advice in both parts. And I would also add the old Kevin Costner movie, Build It and They Will Come. Build a good product. I help people out that can't get repeat customers. And we sell 240 finished animals a year, and we could double that market if I had a place to grow them, because we have a product that wins at wherever anybody enters it. I help some of the Amish, you know, they turn cattle out in the spring, they harvest them in the fall while they're doing their construction jobs or whatever, and they can't get repeat customers. And it's because it might be healthy, but it needs to be eating experience as well. Our meat goes all the way down to multi-million-dollar yachts in West Palm Beach. If you have a good product, it will sell. And you need to be able, if it's not profitable, it's not sustainable.
Okay. Now, George, what you do cattle and lambs, or you just do beef?
No, we do. We run a lot of sheep with our cattle, and sometimes behind. We're working right now on getting rid of barber pole natural way. So we're doing more than 60 days before we rehost anything for barber pole. And that's just something I just started experimenting with this year. And I think we're getting ahead of barber pole. We have no parasites on. Our daughter's a vet. She used to think I was not. She's in a 6-step practice, but we never have parasites. And now that practice is telling people, don't be so quick if you're rotating, which not very many people in our area are. You don't need to have any kind of parasite control. And by not having parasite control on your animals, you'll have a lot more. Your cow pies will be cities. There'll be so many insects in there. Getting rid of that, your fly problems go away. It's just trying to do that now with the barber pole and the lamb. We clean up. We have a lot of water, a lake, and about 2 miles of stream through our farms. And I never wanted cattle in there when I was a kid. At 14 years old, I asked my dad, can I fence off the stream? And he didn't like the idea at all. But I didn't fish, but I didn't like the way they broke down the stream. The problem with fencing it off was 30 years, you couldn't even hear the stream because it was so brushy, let alone see it. And I didn't want to harvest it mechanically. And I didn't want to harvest it or clean it up chemically. So I thought, well, I'm just going to try sheep. And I knew nothing about them, but they've been a delight. They've been just a delight to run with our mixed species setup.
George, what type of sheep do you have on the farm?
We have Dorpers.
Dorpers, okay.
And they're tough. We just, I had them on the road for 7 days, rotational grazing through snow on a farm that we ran 7 miles away. And I just 2 weeks ago, when the ground started to get soft, I drove them 5 miles. I have good dogs through the woods. I didn't even know the woodland that I was starting in, and got home in an hour and 20 minutes. And we'd hauled them up there. It took half a day and 3 trailer loads of 2 guys. So we're always learning. And I'm 75, and the thing, one of the romances of farming is you just never learn it all.
Yeah, that's for sure, that we're always learning something every day. Did I hit everyone on that question?
I think so.
Okay. Evan, you can interrupt me if there's any questions from the audience on the chat box. Let's go on to, we're always hearing from our superiors, Evan and I, about we need to emphasize more profitability. Farm's got to be profitable. So I want to start with George. What is the most profitable enterprise on your farm?
Well, for ours, it's actually, I'm retired from the Marine Corps. I'm retired from the airlines. I didn't want to deal with people. I just wanted to go out in the morning and deal with cattle and sheep and dogs. And so I sold wholesale. And that's a big part of our market still, but we set our price and it's a good price. It's quite profitable for us. And direct market has come to us. I didn't really want to get into it, but we're selling probably 60 animals now direct market, and that's even more profitable. So yeah, I would say don't be afraid of wholesale, but keep yourself out of the commodity roller coaster.
Okay. Ronnie, what's the most profitable enterprise on your farm?
I may be still looking for that. I don't know.
Okay.
Every farm is different. Every manager is different. You know, I started, I'd been helping my father all since I was a teenager. When I took over, I retired from construction business. My main goal was to get the maintenance on the farm up to speed. I wanted the farm to look better. It was somewhere I'd spent my whole life. So I don't know that I have been driven solely by profit. I want to meet my expenses. I would like to make a profit on it. But I think the one part of my marketing, and I sell feeder calves at select sales in Virginia, but I've started developing heifers that I condition, AI breed. They go into a special sale in April. And for the cattle sale, that's probably the most profitable area. Plus, I'm building reputation for the animals that I'm selling. So my goal may not be as driven financially as some other people are here.
Okay. And finally, Kevin, what's the most profitable enterprise on your farm?
I have to say, like Ronnie, we're still working on the profit side of the business. My goal is to get the farm to the level of profitability where it'll support me after I retire. And so retirement's still a few years away. We're still really in a growth phase. So I'll be honest, the finances for the farm and operation aren't very good right now. But there are some, other things we sell. Some of the most profitable things are, we've started direct marketing some of our cull cows. If we have a heifer that doesn't breed or a 3-year-old that doesn't breed, we'll fatten them out and sell them as freezer beef. We've started taking our cull cows, if we can cull them before they're getting bad shape, put fat on them, sell them as hamburger. We can take a cow that's maybe $500 or $600 at the stock market and turn her into $1,500 for the hamburger. And so comparatively, that's a pretty good enterprise for us.
Yeah, I agree. The direct marketing is definitely will increase profits. Speaking about we know that farming not just it's not all about profit. It's also about lifestyle and some other aspects. How is talking a little about soil health, and I'll go start back with Ronnie first. As you've implemented rotational grazing and good management, have you really seen a big increase in your soil fertility? And because one of the big things right now is fertilizer price, or what I saw last night, there may be some fertilizer shortages. How has that affected your farm?
It's been a dramatic change, and I think getting the infrastructure in place to allow rotational grazing. And I've experimented. I was doing day grazing for a while with polywire, and then sometimes I'd wait and go 2 days. If I'm doing hay on another property and I'm gonna be tied up that week, I'll give them a whole pasture for a week. But the grasses are thriving in it. The annuals do a great job naturally improving the soils. You don't have to do a lot of additives to it. So that's been great. We use biosolids on our farm. We've been around those for 30, 40 years. We've been well pleased with that. They have to do a nutrient management plan to only spread on the farm what the land can use. The regulatory agencies are on the farm while it's being spread. So I feel pretty comfortable with that. And that alleviates the need of fertilizer for us.
George?
We don't use any fertilizer anymore on the home farm. If we do, we buy organic fertilizer, which actually hasn't gone up like regular fertilizer. I just checked this week because Cornell University comes to our farm quite a bit to do soil tests, as well as Penn State. And so our soil tests are all free, and we realize we don't really need anything on the home farm, but the farms we rent, because we're making baleage there, we have to put some sort of fertilizer on those. And those people really like us renting because they know I'm going to use it like an organic fertilizer. I don't even take manure from the big dairy farms around us on our farm, even though that's under certified organic, is actually acceptable, but it's not to me because I know so many things have been shot into those cows and put on the soil. I just don't want to come back up in my plants. But we don't any longer need anything on the home farm. Sometimes we'll put some lime down, and that's about all we ever do, and that's only every few years.
Okay. Kevin?
We have seen our fertility definitely improve. We are pretty dependent on outside fertilizer. We have a fairly large lease farm that we can only make hay on. They won't allow us to put livestock on it. So that puts us in a situation where we have to put fertility back. We try to use poultry litter as much as possible to try to put as much organic material back in the soil as we can. And then we'll balance out the potash needs with commercial fertilizer. But what we have seen is the pasture land where we feed hay back onto, we can get enough fertilizer value out of the hay that we're not having to apply any commercial fertilizer on those farms. And we are really starting to see a turnaround in the types of forage that are starting to grow. And we're really starting to see it in the conditioning of our cattle. We calve in the fall, and so we just went through preg checks this past weekend. And my daughter is a veterinarian, and she does our preg checks. And we were all talking, the cows look the best this year that they've ever looked going into spring. And we had 100% breeding success this year, which is something we've never had before. And we attribute that to the better nutrition and ultimately to the better soil health.
Yeah, that kind of fits right into our next question, and I'll continue with you, Kevin. How do you manage your animals in the winter? I mean, do you feed a lot of hay? Do you have a lot of stockpiled forage? What happens there? You have all cattle or any sheep?
We are all cattle.
Okay.
And we are heavily dependent on hay, and part of that is because of the piece of rented land that we have that livestock are excluded from. So we have way more hay than we need. And so our approach has been to try to maximize our stocking rate, go ahead and use the hay that we have, and try to improve our pastures and try to run as many cattle as we can without damaging the pastures. So we do stockpile some. This year we were able to graze up until the end of January, which was a record for us. Now we do start feeding some hay in the fall. This year we probably started in mid-November, just putting a bale or two out a day. Pretty good stuff, trying to keep the cows' body condition scores up for breeding to help with our breeding success. And that seems to work for us.
If I could follow up real quick, Kevin, you find it a bigger advantage to fall in the calve in the fall compared to spring, or what? Why do you guys calve in fall?
We definitely, to us, it's definitely an advantage to calve in the fall. I grew up in a spring calving herd, and spring calving became winter calving. We calved in January and February in a barn. Had to get cows in every night. And about probably 15 years ago, we had a big scours outbreak, and we lost probably 10% of the calf crop. And after that, we made the decision to go to fall calving. And when my wife and I started our own herd, we followed through. Now, the thing that I really like about fall calving, I work during the day, so I can't be there. So the cows calve out on pasture. We're still doing rotational grazing. So, the nice thing about that, it bunches the cows up. I can go out at 5 o'clock in the morning and I can find the cows that are calving pretty quick. We're moving them every day, so the new calves are always born on fresh grass. It doesn't get that cold in September and October, so we don't have much trouble with the calves freezing down. Even if it gets down in the 20s at night, it's usually warming up in the 40s and 50s in the afternoon. So if the cow will just clean the calf up and it gets on the seat, they'll very seldom freeze down on us. So fall calving just works better for us. The other thing that we like about it, you have to feed a lot harder in the winter, definitely, because our cow's lactating. But when we hit the spring flush of grass, our calves are up, they're 300-400 pounds. They're at the size where they're able to take advantage of all that grass. And, then we hit the summer slump in July, the calves are about ready to be sold. So that doesn't tend to hurt us so bad.
Okay. George, back to the, how do you manage your animals in the winter? Do you feed a lot of hay?
We feed baleage. We wrap everything for our feeder cattle because we need to have a marbled, good finished product to stay on top of the market. Our mama cows, we put into strip graze, tightly strip graze, standing corn, non-GMO corn. And I'll talk about that tomorrow, but it's, so I can keep a mama cow for 26 cents a day on our home ground. On rental ground, it's more because they're getting the top third of the stock, all the leaves. Ohio State, I wrote an article for Stop and Grass Farmer about 15 years ago, I think it was, about the cost of keeping the cows over winter with corn. Ohio State and another university did a study from that, and even their test plots, 45 cents a day, which is really amazing for test plots because it takes a couple of years to kind of figure out what you're doing. But they're only getting 3 or 4 ears of corn a day, and they're eating a tassel as well. But the Ohio State fact sheet on doing that, you'd be surprised. Corn stalk, a good type of old GMO corn will have 8.5% protein in the stalk. So I'll see animals standing around at night just grazing on what's left over from the 2 moves I've done during the day. They look like old men chewing on cigars. It's just kind of fun. And what Kevin was talking about, one of the reasons we don't have to put fertilizer down, for every ton of hay you feed, you're getting that you buy in or bring in like he's doing, you're getting 800 pounds of fertilizer that those cows are putting back on the ground. So we do some of the same thing with our feeders. We'll have a sacrifice field and we have all wheeled hay wagons. So we just move them to a new spot every time we fill them up. And so they spread that manure over. For our 400 head of stockers, we'll have a 14 acre or even up to 20 acres sacrifice. And we just move them slowly across those fields. And it's that'll do as far as putting down fertilizer as well.
JJ?
Yeah.
Y'all, so what kind of cattle do y'all look for when you go to buy them, or lambs?
What's that?
What kind of cattle are you looking for to bring home? Or are y'all closed herds now, or what kind of genetics are you looking?
We only buy in bulls. Well, we buy 100 feeders every year, and we produce about 120. So we constantly want to have a feeder herd of 400 animals. And so we buy in, but we rent out bulls so that we can get the proper genetics. Because the one farmer I was talking about, that he called me and he had a big family. I felt sorry for him. I said, well, how much do you want for your animals? I thought because I have a lot of animals like he was talking about, I could fatten them anyhow. And he told me what he wanted. I gave him 20 cents more a pound than he asked for. And I could barely get them finished, even on sorghums with high energy, because it was just the wrong genetics. So I only buy in normally from people who have leased a bull from me because I know what I'm getting at. And oftentimes, the first year after I lease a bull, I don't get any heifers from them because they realize it's a better animal and they get rid of the moms. And so I'm only getting steers. But then after they've been at it for a while, I can buy all their replacements.
Okay. Ronnie, what's your management for the winter time?
I would prefer to stockpile more, but we've had a tough fall the last 2 or 3 years. We just have not had the rain to help us stockpile. I do a lot of summer annuals, millet, and some other things like that. So I'm able to rest a lot of my pastures during that time. So I'm calving in the fall also, and I have a few pastures that are strong in native warm season. So we have some Bermuda grass, we have crabgrass, we have Johnson grass. And so I calve on those pastures, the cool season pastures that are there. And all of my pastures before I started converting had not been reseeded in probably 50 years. So it was a hodgepodge of grasses growing and a lot of weeds in them too. But I've taken 4 or 5 of my pastures out of rotation to try to put the novel fescue in. And I've also done some native warm season perennials for summer grazing that I don't have to keep re-drilling and keep buying seed. But I typically will feed some late fall if I want to get all the growth I can out of my winter annuals and my Kentucky 31 fescue, as well as the novel that I've changed to. And so I'll feed some mid-October, maybe to November sometimes. And then a good winter, I can graze. I've lowered my density, which has helped, but I can graze into the 1st of February. That hadn't worked out the last 2 years because of the pastures that are not productive right now. And then I'll unroll hay. I also bring hay in from another farm. So we're able to do biosolids on that farm. So I feel like we're getting a good dose of nutrients back on these pastures. And I try to focus my pasture that gets the brunt of the heavy grazing, well, the heavy feeding that I want to renovate. So I basically trash that pasture knowing that I'm going to convert it to annuals next year.
Yeah, real quick follow-up on that, Ronnie. Some things that my dad was an extension agent for Ohio State, and he worked with a couple producers that did the Red River crabgrass. Yeah. Have you tried do you think like crabgrass and switchgrass, does that fit into some of our management for as far as summer production?
Yeah, I think it will. And I've done one pasture in switchgrass. It's tough. I had a tough time getting it established. The bottom land that I was putting it in had a loaded seed base. And I would do a burn down to get ready for the switchgrass, and everything else would come up. It would be like a carpet, but very little switchgrass. So I drilled it again. We came up with a scheme through advice. All right, do a spring burn down, don't plant. Wait till your summer weeds and native stuff starts up, do another burn down, and then get it drilled early June. I think that's going to make it. But it's going to take 2 or 3 years. This last year, it started to show itself a little bit more, but it's a slow process. But I think it's going to be beneficial going forward to have this as something that I don't have to re-drill.
JJ, we did have a couple of questions in the chat box from Audra.
Okay.
What is your all's calving windows? Your fall calving windows?
Our window is September 1st to November 1st. The sale that we sell calves on, we're not supposed to have calves before September 1st. And I don't want a calf more than 60 days. You know, it's just, for me, having 2 careers, it's too hard to be checking cows every morning for longer than that. So we really shoot for a 60-day calving window.
Everybody else felt the same?
Go ahead, George.
Go ahead, George.
We're back to a 60-day calving window too, because we used to do May 1st to October 1st because we had a year-round market. But now I have bulls out on places that do like both of these fellows. They have fall calving, and that really keeps us with our 60-day window now, because we don't like the calves in with mama cows in the wintertime because they're building a baby on just a maintenance diet. We don't want a calf, even though certified grass, we could have a weanling still in there with them, but it's too much. Then we don't lose any body score, and we're way north of here, and at 1,000 feet, so we get some real hard winters, and actually perfect for us when the ground's frozen and there's snow. There's no corn left anywhere. It's just, so we've gone to a 60-day window too, just because of the corn and the fact that I can buy fall by born calves.
Another question. Yeah, we have one more questions here from Audra as well. How large are your corn strips, and what is the stocking rate for those strips?
The corn strips?
Yes, how large are they, and what's your stocking rate?
Well, it depends on the shape of the field. Normally I run down 2 rows of the way we with polywire, we just make the field whatever shape we want. And then I'll run down 2 rows with a 4-wheeler or a snowmobile, and I'll move the posts in that far. If it's real wet, I make them reach under and pull all the feed to them so they can't stomp the leaves into the ground while they're eating the ears. It works. We know that 20 acres will take 110 cows from like September 29th to the 1st of May, and we don't put cows out on pasture until the 1st of May, until we have thigh-high grasses.
Now, Ronnie, what is your back to the last question? When do you guys calve?
Fall calving, and we AI to begin with, as well as all the heifers. And then I'll leave the bull in to allow for 2 cycles after that. So we're coming in a little bit under 60 and just trying to tighten that up as much as I can to have a more consistent group of steers when I go to market. And my heifers, I want them about the same body style and weight when we go to that auction.
I think maybe another good question. I'll stick with you, Ronnie. What advice would you give to a producer who's still using continuous grazing? Maybe what would be the first step they could take to improve their management?
Visit some farms that are rotating. You know, it's not the hard work that you may think it is. And the more you're with your cattle, the easier they are to control. They get to see you on the ground walking, which is good. Hey, it's good exercise. You got to do it anyway. So why not be productive while you're doing it? But, you know, just look around. It's just so often to get in that pigeonhole where you got blinders on and you can't see beyond what you're currently doing. But you need to look outside the box. And I think you'll find it not only profitable, but enjoyable once you start doing it.
George, what's your opinion on that?
Well, to not be rotating, whatever length of grass you have on top, if you're grazing down to 1 inch because they're eating the sweet spots, that's all the longer the roots are below the ground. So it's a lot harder for them to survive. And for me, one of the big things that I learned was that if you're not rehosting parasites, you don't have parasites in your cattle. And the benefits of all that is predator bugs, and we have so many predator bugs, even the lightning bug eats alfalfa alfalfa leafhopper weevil. So take care of the livestock in the soil, and it'll take care of the livestock on the soil. And if you're a hard grazer where you just let everything in there and then you take feed out when they need something else, you'll have woody areas in your pasture, and it will be so much less productive in the amount of forage you produce.
Now, Kevin?
I would say my biggest advice is visit people that do rotational grazing. And, you know, whatever your excuse is for not rotational grazing, whatever your limitation is that you think you can't get over, if you look hard enough, you'll find somebody that's rotational grazing in that situation. You know, it's not the same for everybody. What I do doesn't work for people in this area, but there's ways to rotational graze with almost any pasture. The other thing I would say is you know, the two critical things to success are fencing and water. And so those are the two things that you've got to figure out first.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you for bringing up our next question. What are your sources of water on the farm?
Okay, so our sources are mostly all wells right now. In the area where I am, we are not very well blessed with water. So on our home farm, we have a stream that crosses one corner of the property. It goes dry in the summertime. We have a spring-fed pond on the other corner, and it kind of does the same. And so on the home farm, we water from a well and also from a municipal water supply. One of our rental farms, we water out of a pond. That farm has spring-fed watering troughs, which also go dry in the summertime. But luckily, we have a pond there that we can gravity flow out of into a portable trough, and we use that during the summer. And then we have a new rental project that we're working on, which is actually bordered by the river. But we don't want to be putting cows in the river, so we're in the process of digging wells and putting a water system in for that farm.
Okay, Ronnie, what are your sources there on your farm?
We're blessed with a good supply of water in Goochland, and we're surrounded by streams, which used to be the water source, but when we did the SL6, we had to fence all those out. We also had two ponds, total about 8 acres. That was in the middle of the farm. We set up two systems. Some of the pastures I run off the well we had at the house, and that was a strong enough well we could do that. But we also ran an intake out of one of the ponds. We piped and pumped water to the top of the hill. We put in 3 1,500-gallon septic tanks in series, and I have 4,500 gallons of water that we then gravity feed to the pastures. So I can lose power for 3 or 4 days and still have water. So great design. Keith Burgess at Monacan came up with that scheme, and I've been very pleased with it in the 10, 12 years I've been using it.
Okay, George?
We run from one well all over the home farm. At the closest farm, we have a couple farms that we own, but they're not contingent. So on one farm, we have a solar system and big 300-gallon industrial equipment tires, underground fed to those so we can use them all winter long. And then the home farm, we run, it's almost 300 acres there, all from one well. We dig our pipelines. Every year we put in 2 or 3, in the wintertime, we put in 2 or 3 more industrial tires, 300-gallon ones we like the best. We have some as big as 600, but that's just a little bit bigger than we really like. We probably have on just the home farm, probably 30. I'd have to count them. We used to have to pipe 1-inch pipe, 1 1/4-inch pipe for like 600 yards, and it would be such a battle for water. So the biggest distance we would have between tanks now is about 300 feet.
Oh,
and
okay.
The black tires for us, they'll freeze up in the wintertime, but as soon as you put cattle into that pasture, you break 3 or 4 inches of ice out, and that there's enough animals that are sucking up that spring water that just melts the top off, and then that sunlight on the black tires will heat that up quite a bit more than if I had concrete.
Okay. I do have a follow-up, George. Why do you guys just feed baleage for your, maybe for our audience, because there is a little bit more cost to making baleage with your plastic wrap and the labor and all that, but why do you feed that compared to just dry hay?
Well, dry hay would work well for us as well if it's high quality. And we treat our feeders like they're dairy cows. They're picky, if we have something they don't like, we can take it out to mama herd in the corn and they'll clean it up, even though they won't come out of the corn to do that. But we do 2,000 to 2,400 bales, so there's no way for us to store them. So to wrap them, instead of losing that outside perimeter of the bale, we're saving it all as good, high quality forage, and we don't have to worry about the weather effects on it. So it's worth it to us to pay for the wrap. Now we do tubes, we don't do individual wraps, and that's a third less plastic. We don't like the plastic. We don't burn any plastic. We actually have to pay to have it all the way. We have a big dumpster that we fill it up, and then the company comes. I don't know where it goes, but it's not burned. And it is an expense, but it also comes back to us in a higher, well, I shouldn't say higher quality, but a very good quality feed.
Evan, do we have any more questions from the audience?
Not that I see. I'm trying to prod some of them, JJ.
Okay. Also, we're heading on towards 11 o'clock here, but I want to start back with Kevin. Do you have sometimes end of fight infected tall fescue is a dirty word, but do you have a lot of fescue on the farm? And if you do, how do you manage it?
Oh, yeah, we definitely do have a lot of fescue. I mean, I am in the fescue belt. Our primary tool for Kentucky 31 is kill it and replace it. But that's not practical everywhere. So we have rental farms that are still Kentucky 31. We use them for wintertime feeding. We use them for stockpile. All of our hay ground is a mixture of Kentucky 31 and orchard grass and just native grass. And the toxic endophyte doesn't really hurt you in dry hay. By the time you're feeding it, the endophyte's pretty well dead, and so that you don't get the fescue toxicosis effects. We do try to rotate the cattle on and off of the Kentucky 31. We actually, one of the reasons that we started doing pasture renovation was because we were at one time 100% Kentucky 31 pasture. And when we started rotating and we started forcing those cows to really utilize the seed heads and the mature Kentucky 31, we got into a lot of fescue toxicosis problems. We started losing switches off of our tails. We got into fescue foot, body condition problems. And so our initial emphasis for starting a pasture renovation was just to get out of that and to get our weaning weights up on our calves. So we try to wean on the novel endophyte, and we try to put our young stock on that. But we try to make sure that we have some Kentucky 31 to rotate onto. One of our products is bred commercial heifers, and we understand that those heifers are going to go out on Kentucky 31. And so we don't ever want to get our cow herd to a point where they're innocent to it, because we understand that if we do that and our heifers go out onto other people's properties and they fall apart when they hit the Kentucky 31, then we're not going to sell that person any more heifers. So, we want to minimize the amount of Kentucky 31 in our pastures, but I don't believe we ever want to eliminate it.
George?
We do this. Well, we did the same thing. We took out all when I first started, I didn't know what endophytes were, and I couldn't get good looking grasses grazed. The cattle just didn't want to have it. So we took it all out when I found out about endophytes. We have non-endophyte fescues, but we rent some ground that is so steep that you can't, and stony, that you can't get in there with any kind of equipment. So what we did was I so overgrazed it that you could hardly see the grass and the dirt. And I kept my mama cows in there until they did that. And then I broadcast, even though it was in late April, I still put down clover, which is late to put down clover seed. But clover is that hard shell. It knows when it's the right time to come on, great conditions. And then broadcast a lot of endophyte-free fescues and ryegrass. And the person I got that ground from could not believe it. He didn't think it was productive for anything. And I knew what endophytes would do to the animals by then. So I didn't want it just as pasture. And he couldn't believe what I could do. In 2 years, it looked like a hayfield. There'd be 14-inch tall grass in there in the spring. Delighted with what I was able to do with cattle.
Ronnie, how do you manage? Do you have a lot of Kentucky 31 on your farm?
Yeah, pretty much everything I started with was Kentucky 31 mix. There was always some other things in the pastures. But I dilute it with the annual drilling that I do on the annuals. I'll drill into existing sod, and I'll use a rye or triticale. I usually put hairy vetch, I put crimson clover, canola that'll help build the soil, but it also dilutes that fescue that's still there. We are converting 1 or 2 pastures at a time to the novel. And then the summer annuals, the millets and that sort of thing, I just take as much pressure. I don't depend on the fescue except for stockpiling, and that's where I winter out when I run it a grazing. So just try to take the pressure off of it, try to keep it going seed head, and I'm gonna switch it out as soon as I get the opportunity.
Yeah, Evan, do we have any more questions from the audience?
No, sir.
Okay, because we probably only have time for maybe a couple more questions. Yeah. And I'll start back with Kevin. If there's let me boil down. If there's one piece of advice you could give to another farmer, what would that be?
I guess my biggest advice is don't be afraid to try new things.
Okay. George, what would be your best piece of advice?
I'd have to go back to saying, make a good product, and you won't have any trouble selling what you have, and you'll have a hard time keeping up, and start very slow. Like I refused to borrow money to get out of the fact I had no equipment, and it turned out to be a blessing. I didn't want to borrow money, so I just thought I'm just going to make them do the work. So just start with a little bit and build on it, and you'll learn. Every step will teach you something.
Ronnie?
Do your homework first. I think you need to know what your goals are, what you want to accomplish. And it's like getting in your car and driving and not know where you're going. How do you know when you get there? But do something that you enjoy. If you're doing that, it's not work, it's pleasure. And take it slow, build it gradually, and just keep going ahead.
Okay, great. And again, I want to thank you guys for taking out time during the conference, for spending some time with us, giving us some advice, management tips. Of course, I do have one question. Evan's shaking his head already, but my dad said there was 2 types of music, country and Western. So I want to start with Ronnie. Who's your favorite country artist?
Oh, it's been a number of them. Willie Nelson used to be, and I don't know that anybody's replaced him yet.
Okay. What about you, George?
I'd have to say Dolly Parton. I'd never really been music fans, but the thing I liked about her, she was interviewed once, and somebody said, well, you've had plastic surgery. She said, it takes a lot of money to look this cheap. And I
there you go. She always has a good sense of humor.
Yes, I'd say Dolly Parton.
Kevin?
I would have to say I'm more old school. I really like the group Alabama, and the reason is they were not only, they were really good musicians, but also really good farmers. They were best entertainers. I feel like they left a big mark on the world as a group by their music and also by their work outside their careers, outside their musical career.
Great.
Continue to.
Good. And like I was showing Evan before, this week we're going to this week's artist of the week is Johnny Cash. This is live at San Quentin, which was a very popular album that he had. Last week, Dr. Mira Delanovich, her favorite artist was Johnny Cash, and Willie Nelson. She had two, so we had to give a shout out to Johnny Cash there. But again, I want to thank Ronnie and George and Kevin for being on Mountaineer Farm Talk. You guys have just a world of knowledge and experience that maybe we could share with some of the other producers that tune into the program. I hope that everyone enjoys the Appalachian Grazing Conference. Have you guys? How was Greg Judy this morning?
He was very good.
Yes.
Good. I don't think that they had the Appalachian Grazing Conference live last year, but it's good to have that. I think one of the major advantages is the networking, meeting other like-minded producers, and you're always, no matter how old you are, you're always learning something new. And once again, I wanted to thank Dr. Ed Rayburn and Barb Greenleaf for giving you guys your contact information and helping us out, giving us a little room here. Again, Ronnie Knuckles with Overhome Farm in Virginia, Kevin Moyers from Hot Springs, Virginia, and George Lake with Thistle Creek Farm there in Pennsylvania. What city are you near, George?
About 20 miles west of State College, or Penn State's main.
Oh, that's right. 20 miles of State College. Okay. If that, Evan, do we have any more questions?
Not that I saw. Audra did compliment us on this program today. So thank you, Audra, for tuning in. She's a faithful listener.
Yeah. Wonderful. I a super program today. A lot of good information. I just want to remind everyone that our programs and activities offered by West Virginia University Extension Service are available to all persons without regard to race, color, sex, disability, religion, age, veteran status, political beliefs, sexual orientation, national origin, and marital or family status. Once again, we are Mountaineer Farm Talk, the big voice of West Virginia agriculture. We are a program of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Unit for West Virginia University Extension. I want to thank our guests again. And next week, we are going to be interviewing Kevin Schaefer and Jerry Yates. They are both in charge of the West Virginia Young Sire and Heifer evaluation program. So we'll be talking about the bull sales, the Wardensville and the Southern Bull Test sales, which are coming up in the next couple weeks. So I hope everyone enjoys the weekend. Hope that you guys learn a lot, have fun at the Appalachian Grazing Conference, and we will see everyone next week.